Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Sam, prog rock from Norway, with an interesting mix of acoustic and electronic elements. Alright, let's dive into this. The group is called GIANTSKY. We're going to be checking out GIANTSKY 2, which is their 2023 album. Side A. There's only 4 tracks on this album. Side A, B, C, and D. So we're going to be looking at the first side. That's a double album then, isn't it? Over an hour long of prog music. All right, let's dive into this and see what GIANTSKY is bringing to the table today. Very spacey with the drone and the French horn-like synthesizer tone. A little bit of tension there. It started out very majestic. And a bit of danger, awe, I think is definitely a part of this. Ooh. Beauty. But also a little bit of like just a touch of melancholy in there. Very multifaceted musical atmosphere. Interesting bit of silence there.
Do you see how it goes and how it grows when the ego reigns in you? You wanted to play, you wanted the fame, but still you never showed up.
The arpeggiating sequencer with the staccato flutes on the outside. Interesting to bring a little bit more of a wider instrumental palette there to then bring us back to this indie rock vibe. Massive sounds. Lots of warble, but very overdriven too. That was a scream, right? Yeah, very cool contrast, large amount of dynamics on this so far. Very like beautiful and optimistic, but not exclusively. I'm having a hard time picking out what the little bit is aside from that. It's not a it's not a crossfade. It's another, well, there was still a little bit of volume over there, but that's a fairly hard stop between ideas again. Is this a different vocalist too? Might just be a different production style on it. Oh, that fast arpeggiation absolutely works to fill in a lot of the space and help propel the song forward a bit. Oh, such a warm movement. I mean, this is gorgeous. A bit on the simple side, but still gorgeous. Very. I like that. Those slides. Dude, that's slick. The bass is strong here, too. I love the drum work. The use of the reverb there is really nice too. I think that's the second movement we've heard really strong reverb on to just sort of indicate a vastness. You know, the compression and the vocals, they work really well with the extra bit of white noise that exists on the outskirts. Yeah, I generally enjoyed that. It has you know what it reminds me of? A modern take on what bands like ELO were doing back in the day. What do they call it? Symphonic prog or symphonic pop, something like that. Where, I mean, if you take the core identity to a lot of this, it's pop rock. There's a little bit of like an indie popish sound at times. It brings in a little bit of a noisier indie rock at some places, particularly towards the middle of the track. And we saw a little bit of that there at the end too, kind of bringing in a little bit of the noisier side that rock can be. But generally, I think this song is rather palatable production wise, melodically, harmonically. It's an expressive type of pop rock, but a very modern idea of what pop rock is, more so than what ELO was doing decades ago, which was taking, that era's pop rock and putting some symphonic elements and progressive elements on it. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed. Oh, plus there's that whole um softer moment towards the end of the song. What was that, like minutes 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there? That was straight up poppy, 100%. So yeah, there's a lot of pop and pop rock adjacent things in here. And I find that this does appeal to me. There's a lot of stuff in here that absolutely works for me, and the expansion of the ideas only solidifies it as something that I need to check out more of. Giant Sky. And they have two albums out, Giant Sky 1 and Giant Sky 2. All right, I think how I want to talk about this is in movements, because it almost feels like three different songs entirely here. Not necessarily a large 14-minute idea where everything smoothly moves between each other. The orchestral, electronic, instrumental bit that was like the first 2 or 3 minutes feels very different than the indie rock section that occurred after that until I guess about the halfway mark. And then the final half of the song with the sort of ballady pop stuff that ended with that big rock ending. That kind of feels like its own too, and there's not a lot of carryover. Things that I would describe in the first movement aren't really ways I've described the other two, and the same is accurate for movements 2 and 3. There's no motifs. I don't even think that there's a carryover of harmonic information, such as chord progression. Um, there's a different vocalist in all of them, too, I think. Have to look that up later when I check out the lyrics, see what the personnel and member list is on this. There's a lot going on, but it does feel like three very distinct ideas that just happen to be on the same track. So let's start with movement 1, the instrumental bit. I really love this. It kind of starts off with something very spacey. We have a pedal tone off on the left and a synthesizer that captures a feeling of a French horn. I'm not going to even say that it's like a lower fidelity MIDI version of a French horn. It definitely doesn't sound like a French horn, but it feels like one. I don't know a better way to describe that. But these two instruments absolutely, the pedal tone with the melody and the instrumentation of the two just screams to me science fiction. Something about it. And from there, we do explore some chords that embody that beauty, danger, vastness, expansiveness. It's an opening harmonic movement, and it's mostly derived of layers for textures and chords. There isn't a lot of melody in the opening 2 or 3 minutes of this track. And the chords are very expressive. They're not just, here's our 4 chord loop, and we're just going to keep looping that chunk over and over. It explores things, it creates something very multifaceted. The progression itself is beautiful, and it's interesting that it does start a little more rigid, but by the end of it, I think it's just linear chords. There is no, looped progression. We're just constantly moving in a forward momentum, in a forward direction, going towards whatever chord makes sense next rather than whatever chord is in a loop or a pattern. And this is what gives it its expressiveness. This is what allows it to feel afraid and joyous and in awe of something and beautiful all at the same time. It embodies all of this because the relationships between these two chords are different than the relationship between the next two chords and the next two chords. And it's just this constant growth of emotion. It ends up being exceptionally multifaceted and explores just a gorgeous series of emotions that craft an experience more so than an atmosphere. The atmosphere is constantly changing. The emotional resonance of any moment is different than the moment that comes after it, which I'm sure is, I mean, look at this album art real quick. We have a shadow, a figure that looks like a human standing amongst the cosmos. Blues and purples, smokes and vapors, probably not smoke, but vapors existing with, stretch lines coming out as if they are moving at such a pace that the periphery is warping, but there's also what looks to be outlines of large birds, maybe even as a way to a subtle nod towards constellations. You look at this album art, you're immediately put into a mindset that I think this opening section of this track lends itself very well to the constant and ever growing changing emotions at play when exposed to something like this. I can't imagine what it would be like to be in space, to see this stuff firsthand. It's probably a lot of feeling, and they capture so much of it in this opening bit. And it's all done with beautiful instrumentation too. And as the descriptor mentioned, I think it was Sam, it's a little bit of everything. There are some electronic instruments in here. There are some electric instruments in here. There are acoustic instruments. We have electronic music, we have rock instrumentation, we have orchestral instrumentation. Although I think it's just strings and woodwinds. I don't think I heard any brass on this track. Definitely flutes, maybe an oboe. No saxes, that's for sure. Lots of strings though. And then the synthesizers. So, yeah, a little bit of everything though. The guitar, electric guitar show up in here too. It's just a wonderful passage, and I greatly enjoyed it. And then this took us to some indie rock. Acoustic guitar, rock chord progression, and very forward projected pop rock vocals. Very different than the other opening. I mean, the opening of this track, the opening of the album even. I mean, this is side A. It starts off with such strong instrumentation and orchestration, and then we just get bass guitar, acoustic guitar, drums, and vocals. Very rock oriented. The composition has changed, the instrumental choice has changed. We get a little bit more layering to this, and then another vocalist jumps in. The first one being a bit more masculine, this one being more feminine. The instrumentation changes alongside the vocals, though. The rock instrumentation is shoved aside in favor for flutes and strings and synthesizers, and it paints something very light and ethereal. Very different than the grounded rootedness of the rock sound earlier, especially with the acoustic instrumentation of that. This feels like whatever was weighing us down has let go, and we can just float into whatever. We can just go wherever we want. It's a very freeing sound, and then we get sucked back down to earth as the rock instrumentation comes back in. I believe around this point, though, we begin to introduce a little bit of the electric guitar, which we do see in this movement later on as we bring in the noisier part. But I do think the noisy section comes after the second time we return to the light, ethereal, woodwind and string-based section. But we do this back and forth. And then we do get into something heavy and noisy, and I have no idea how to pair that to the rest of the experience. It is a brand new section that stands out against everything we've listened, not even just from this movement, but even from the intro. Everything in here has been delicately placed in a way to ensure that there's maximum emotional fidelity to each moment, with a beautiful lining up of instrumentation. A lot of this is due to a heavy use of acoustic instrumentation, and when the synth is used, it is a lighter, less abrasive tones. Out of nowhere, we have this noisy electric guitar. It brings a totally different size and sound and atmosphere to everything. I mean, we've listened to almost 5, 6 minutes of music now, and this is where they decide to bring in something abrasive. Totally shook me a little bit, to be honest. I was expecting gorgeous instrumentation with pristine production throughout this entire song, and then we get hit with this fuzzy, noisy, reverbery guitar that plays around with dissonant tones. It's more blunt than usual because it is contrasted hard against everything else. I don't know how to interpret it. And interestingly, we have a fade out in the middle of a song. This noise, we have a guitar solo that comes on top of it. It's just a big noisy section. I think there was screaming in here too. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I asked if anyone else heard that in the reaction, but it sounded like behind all of the fuzzy noise was just maybe not like a metal scream, but a post-hardcore type of harsh, that type of fry scream, but muffled, compressed, pushed into the mix, buried in everything. I don't know. And then a fade out in the middle of a song. That just blew my mind too. And we're going to talk about that in a second after diving into movement 3, which I thought was absolutely gorgeous from start to finish. We have a hyper focus on something very light and airy, much like the lighter section of movement 2, but is the core focus of this song. We are in this for 3, maybe 4 minutes. We have flute, we have strings. I don't think there's any percussion here. We have what sounds to me like maybe a new feminine vocalist as well. Something about the timbre feels just a little darker and less bright than the first vocalist, but it could also be production tricks as well. I'm not sure. That, like I mentioned earlier, that's something I'm going to look up later when I check out the lyrics. Regardless, it captures that same vibe, that same energy with a lot of the same instrumentation, but resides within it, where it actually has time to add layers to fully explore this space rather than to land in it fully formed and then move back away from it because it was acting as contrast to the rockier part, which the rockier part evolved into that noisy section at the end of movement 2. So the lighter section was always just contrast. It was always just to add dynamics and to oppose the core rock element in movement 2. Here it gets to be the core element of this movement, and I really enjoy that. We get to spend a lot of time with this honestly beautiful writing. The layering, the instrument choices, the vocal delivery, everything just feels very light and ephemeral. And I really enjoy that. It does grow into something else, though. We do bring in a big rock ending. And we get to finish the song on a pretty high note. It feels, once again, massive, but also full of potential. I think that's what really draws me to it. There is a little bit of darkness to this entire movement, but it's hidden underneath all of this bright positivity, this beauty, even throughout this section. But the guitars, the synths, the drums, I mean, this is how you bring in electric guitars into all of this writing in a more positive, cohesive way, which makes me think that the noisy guitar from movement 2 was supposed to indicate something or represent something that I just don't get right now. I don't understand it yet, but it was an intentional choice. because they are definitely pairing both sides of their writing here at the end of this track really well. And it almost acts as a slow burn. We kind of add a few ideas in the more ethereal part until it grows into this big section, and then we add more layers on top of that to bring us to the end of the song. Some vocals come in with some compression to them. I think they're compressed cleans. The compression actually matches what the synths are doing on the outside. There's a lot of white noise on top of those, and it kind of comes together and matches. Normally, I would think that harsh vocals would be a bit out of place in a track like this, but they're subtly including that harsh sound, the compression, on other instruments, and they're incorporating it into the atmosphere so that when the vocals come in, oh, okay, that just matches. It doesn't sound aggressive, it just sounds like it's of the space, of the atmosphere. They come in and repeat some lines. I didn't catch what they were, but I did hear similar words. Love was in there, and change or something like that. It generally sounded the same though. And it's a nice way to kind of reach a peak, much like post rock typically does, to build into a really big moment. And this is, I think, the only part of this entire suite that I think does work collectively. Rising from lows to highs, back to lows to mids, lows to highs, lows to the highest, the peak. The general pacing of this 14 minutes works well, even if I can't hear much compositional continuity between these movements. I do think that the general journey and pacing and emotional flow work phenomenally. And it does all reach a peak here. And I love it. It's just a big release of all of this energy that we've been accumulating, not necessarily through tension, but through anticipation. There's been a lot of lower energy sections here. Where does that go? Where does it build to? That's where we get the ending of this track. And like I said, I think the ending works really well for the entire suite, but also just for this movement too. It does kind of come out of nowhere though. Harmonically, it's slightly adjacent to the lower energy part that precedes it, but emotionally, energy wise, it's very different. It's louder, it's more layered, it's denser, there's compression to it, it is wider, and it's just so. It almost reminds me a little bit of the opening of this entire suite as far as the emotional complexity of it. But it's not the same type of exploration. It's not the same facets of emotion that we're looking at. It's just a similar idea of going for a multifaceted atmosphere. So I think that's really where I stand on this. I love individual parts of this. I have a really tough time seeing it as a whole. And the composition just really isn't there to support it. But the other questionable thing is the hard breaks in here. It's so easy to divide this into three movements because the song turns to silence by itself. It has walls to indicate and block off each of these three portions of the song. It's not even like I had to use theory to say, oh, this is probably a good place to stop and, separate it off into its own movement. The song does it by itself, but without any sort of motif or carryover, anything that suggests these should all be understood together. That's what confuses me about it. They're all tied together in 14 minutes, but it doesn't feel unified. And I'm really curious to get into the lyrics to see if they explore any of that. Yeah, I think I was gonna add something to that based on my inflection, but that was the end of my thought. Uh, let me let me hit some lyrics on Giant Sky side A, and we'll see what's going on there. All right, some interesting information here. On Spotify, both of the albums are broken up into chunks. Giant Sky 1 just had side A and B. Giant Sky 2 has sides A, B, C, and D since it's a double album. But if you go over to Giant Sky's Bandcamp page, you get a very different showcasing. There's individual tracks. In fact, this album has 13 tracks on it. This intrigued me a little bit because they do have a single on Spotify. It's called Origin of Species. So I went and listened to it real quick, and it's the opening of side A, of disc A. What was this called? Side A, yeah. It's the opening instrumental bit, the first like 2 or 3 minutes of the song. And sure enough, when I go on to Spotify, track 1 is Origin of Species. Track 2 is called Imposter, it's 4.5 minutes long, and track 3 is called Speak Through Walls, it's 7.5 minutes long, and I didn't go back and listen, but generally speaking, that is about where I felt the breaks in the movements to be. It wasn't 3 movements, it was 3 tracks that, for whatever reason, on Spotify, they're grouped up into the side of an album. I find this very interesting because if you listen to it on Bandcamp, it's implied that these are different tracks. If you listen to it on Spotify, it's implied that it's supposed to be understood as a whole idea. But I have a really tough time hearing this as a cohesive concept. These are 3 very distinct ideas. Separating them into tracks makes more sense. I'm really curious why the band decides to do it this way on Spotify. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't feel like it's the proper way to. It doesn't imply the proper mentality to be in, to experience this, I think, in the way that it should. And right now, there really isn't an authorial intent for how this should be listened to, how this should be understood. It is separated both into tracks and as an entire side of an album. I'm curious which one they feel is the right one. I'm still curious why they're broken up 2 different ways. I did look though, and there are a lot of extra musicians on this. As far as I can tell, I think that this is a 1-person band. And they have a ton of guest musicians show up for all sorts of things: flutes, strings, organs, extra vocals, drummers, guitarists, acoustic guitarists, synth arpeggios. They got a person just got to do synth arpeggios, banjos, percussion, a voice that shows up on one of the tracks, I guess just to do like spoken word stuff. And that's just disc 1. What we have here though is Marina Sconce on movement 2 and Charlotte Stav on movement 3, or tracks 2 and tracks 3, according to the Bandcamp list. So they were different vocalists there. I'm going to assume that the main vocalist, the person that runs this band, I don't think I have a name for that person. Anyways, I assume that they're doing the male vocals. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me. All right, so with all of that interesting information out of the way, let's look at the lyrics. Movement 2, or track 2, on Bandcamp, which is called Imposter, is about someone who is being called out for wanting to be famous, to have power, but not wanting to have any of the responsibilities of that. It says, "Do you see how it goes when the ego reigns in you? You wanted to play, you wanted the fame, but you never showed up. You have this fake display. It's a space that you crave." It says, "But you could never deal with the bright, transparent light. So you drive along, you play his songs, you like them, but they bring you down. You've seen the world, how boring to know everything." That's it. Just kind of calling someone out for, doing a lot of talking, but not being able to walk the walk that goes with talking the talk. That's, huh. I can't really put that to the music at all. My experience of this song is very different, although that does explain a little bit more of the grit towards the end of the song since there is an animosity in the lyrics. But I mean, somewhere in there is supposed to have a light, ethereal sound, and I don't know anything in there that really embodies that. Track 3 is called Speak Through Walls and is about somebody who gets backstabbed. Says at one point, I called you my friend, but it's time that you left now. You've spoken too long with a serpent's tongue. Pretty much this entire track is about I used to have love for you, but now you've proven you don't deserve it. So leave. And since you're not leaving, I guess we're going to have to take this to the next level. At one point, saying, okay, it used to be love, so bring on the knives. It's time for a showdown. If you want to make this dirty, let's make it dirty. And that's the entirety of that song. The end seems to push a little bit towards change. It says, don't go changing his mind. There's a change in his blood. There's a change in the ground. The word change is used like 4 times in the final, I don't know, 8 lines or so. Basically, though, times are changing. We used to be close, now we're not. You got to deal with it. You got to learn how to grow from that. And so this was supposed to be the song that was very soothing and comforting, very ethereal, chill to listen to, gorgeous. It's a beautiful track. And the ending, this big swell up. Multifaceted, sure, but angry? I don't know, man. I didn't catch most of that. So I'm very confused about this. The first track is called Origin of Species. It's a good title, I think, for a sound that is focusing on vastness, of potential, of beauty. The beginning of a species captures a lot of that. There's also a bit of terror to that. What is going to happen? How is this going to alter the ecosystem? There's all sorts of things that can come into that equation of, introducing a new group of uh, beings into a system. But it's also gorgeous too to see this sort of evolution, this birth of something new. It matches all of that, sure, but man, their spacey sound kind of clashes a little bit with everything else that goes on in the tracks. Like I mentioned, it's an intro that doesn't really get brought back up in the next 2 songs. So it's kind of like a string intro at the beginning of a death metal album. Yeah, it sounds cool, but don't get used to it because that's not the status quo of the album you just put in. It kind of stands on its own as something to do to kick the album off. And that's kind of what the nice orchestral start to this is too. I want to dig more into this. I may end up listening to, I don't know, the rest of this album, maybe the previous album. I don't know. I'm thinking people might want me to do reactions to this, so I kind of feel like I need to hold off on it. But I'm very intrigued about this. I like the music side of it. I think the entire symphonic pop rock thing works really well. The lyrics are not what I expected, though. They're rooted and grounded in basic human drama. It's like the inverse of all of the spectacle and beauty and awe that the music is exploring. I don't know. That schism has me intrigued. What's going on here? Is there something else at play? Is this, just the beginning? Are we going to subvert this by the end of an album? That's kind of where my mind is at right now. But these are just my thoughts on GIANTSKY's Side A, or I guess Origin of Species, Imposter, and Speak Through Walls. This is a rare case where somebody got 3-track reactions for their special selection. Until next, oh no, geez, I'm so thrown off by that. I just realized what happened. All right, these are my thoughts on this. What are yours? Did you enjoy this? Did anything stand out to you? Is there anything you would like to add on to what I said, or correct me on. Maybe you have your own interpretation or opinion about any of this. Put all of that and any other thoughts you might have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, there's a link for Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.